Next on Unsolved Mysteries. An undercover drug buy goes south, and a federal agent is shot. Smoke billows from a woman. An old man bursts into flames. Two bizarre cases of spontaneous combustion. It was the wildest town in the Wild West. Today, some say that the legendary lawman who tamed it is still haunting the streets of Deadwood. The police called it suicide, but the evidence tells a different story. Who killed Danny Williams? 5 cases with strange clues and bizarre twists, and secrets that you would never expect. I'm Dennis Farina, and this is Unsolved Mysteries. Pleasure cruises. On the surface, they seem like a perfectly safe way to take a vacation. But appearances are not always what they seem. According to the New York Times, beneath the carefree party atmosphere lies a little-known secret: sexual assaults. Some claim crime occurs more regularly than cruise lines would care to admit. This was true of the Bradley family when they set sail from Puerto Rico. They had no idea of the disaster to come. Amy Bradley was an all-American girl. She was pretty, outgoing, and athletic. And even though Amy was a strong swimmer and a trained lifeguard, she was terrified of the ocean. Her parents had to persuade her into joining them on the Caribbean cruise ship Rhapsody of the Seas.
She was reluctant about going up to the railing. It was kind of like, ugh, that kind of a feeling.
There you go, come on.
But her dad and her brother both said, come on here and we'll hold on to you.
Oh my God, it is so fun.
Amy managed to put her fears aside. Cruise life offered plenty of distractions. Their third night at sea, Amy and her brother Brad partied long and hard. Neither returned to the family's cabin until 3:40 a.m. Amy's dad, Ron, woke up when she came in.
Amy? Sweetheart, could you turn that light off for me, please? Sure. Thanks.
Hey.
She said she hadn't been feeling too well because of the motion of the boat since we left Aruba that evening. So she said she was going to just stay out there and get some fresh air.
The next time Ron woke up, Brad had gone to bed, and Amy was asleep on the balcony.
I could see Amy's legs from her hips down. She looks like she's resting comfortably. And dozed back off to sleep. The balcony door was closed, because if it hadn't been closed, I would have got it up and closed it.
30 minutes later, the Bradleys' dream vacation morphed into a nightmare.
About 6 o'clock, something awoke me again. Got up, looked out on the balcony, and the balcony door was open about 14, 16 inches, and Amy wasn't on the deck. And I had a little funny feeling at that time, because it was unlike her to be up that early in the morning.
Amy! Excuse me. We need some help. I'd like to have a page for my daughter is missing.
May I ask how old she is?
She's 20.
The ship's crew claimed that it was too early to use loudspeakers. And to make matters worse, the ship had just docked into the port of Curacao.
Unless it's a medical emergency, we do not page.
And I got very, very panicked and frightened. And I asked them to please don't put the gangplank down. You need to lock the ship up. You need to back the ship off of the dock. Don't let anybody off of this boat. Somebody's got my daughter.
Amy Bradley, please contact the purser's desk.
The Bradleys claimed the purser didn't broadcast the first page for Amy until 10 minutes to 8.
Bradley, please contact purser's desk.
By then, most of the passengers had disembarked for the day.
I became more and more frantic because I knew that if she was in a position to hear the announcement, she would come immediately to us. And then I had thoughts that maybe somebody had her in a room and she heard it and couldn't get to us.
Finally, the captain ordered a search. Officials claimed they combed through all 10 decks, all 999 rooms, and found nothing. A 3-day search of the ocean also failed to turn up any trace of Amy. The Bradleys began to piece together Amy's last hours on board the ship. She left the balcony between 5:30 and 6 a.m. They know she took her clothes, they know she took her cigarettes, but they don't know where she was going. And then they found a witness. A young woman said she saw Amy early that morning. Amy was with the bass player from the ship's band.
I saw Amy and the band member walk over and up to the next deck up above us, and then about 10 minutes later, he came walking around by himself.
Others claimed that they had seen the bass player flirting with Amy the night before.
She said that when they were dancing at the disco, he tried to, dance a little too close, and she had to tell him to back off a little bit.
That morning, no one but the Bradley family and ship security knew Amy was missing. No one, that is, except the bass player, according to Amy's brother.
Hey, Brad, sorry to hear about your sister.
That's a really odd thing to say that early in the stages of this thing, Nobody knew except for us, or my family and I, and security, that something may be wrong.
Authorities never found any evidence that the bass player was involved with Amy's disappearance. Then, a disturbing new theory emerged.
There's rumor and legend surrounding slavery in the Southern Caribbean. It's not uncommon knowledge in the maritime community that young white women are considered to be very desirable to foreign procurers.
Amy would have been a trophy. Amy would have been someone that I believe could have been picked out and fingered to move off of that ship. She could have been held and hidden. She could have been possibly drugged, taken from that ship.
The Bradleys left the cruise ship not knowing if they would ever see Amy again, but still hopeful she will one day return.
I have strong belief that she is alive and she's trying to get back to us. And I just pray that one day we'll get a phone call or we'll get some information from someone that will lead us to her.
How in the world can anybody ever give up looking for their child? Never in my lifetime. Not until I put my hands on her and we get her home.
Officials of the cruise line insist that Amy either left the ship on her own or met with an accident. However, her parents are still convinced that she was a victim of foul play. They're offering a $250,000 reward for information. If you know anything about this case, please log on to our website at unsolved.com. Coming up, a ghost from the Wild West still calls Deadwood, South Dakota, his home. But next, an undercover drug buy ends in a deadly shootout. Recently, we profiled career criminal Thomas Dixon. Dixon couldn't care less about rehabilitation. In fact, his 10 years of hard time for armed robbery only left Dixon hot for another score.
This is a holdup.
During the 5 months following his release from prison, Dixon, with a series of different accomplices, knocked off 7 banks in North Carolina. An FBI raid finally sent Dixon back to prison for another 10 years. Once paroled, Dixon never hesitated. He robbed more banks, no apologies, no regrets.
This is a holdup.
Dixon again hit banks in the Carolinas, 5 in a 7-week period. He showed up in one surveillance tape after another.
Have you FBI ever heard of Thomas Dixon?
Dixon had refined his MO. He began to taunt the FBI with advance notice of his bank jobs. Dixon even left one of his getaway cards hidden in plain sight. Inside were photos of Dixon's intimidating arsenal. In a note, Dixon threatened further robberies and warned that any attempt to stop him would end in bloodshed.
Dixon was alerting us to the fact that he is heavily armed and he has every intention of using those arms in a confrontation with law enforcement.
Update. Just before our initial broadcast, Thomas Dixon hit another bank and then headed to Tennessee. In Tennessee, Dixon took a room in this motel. Housekeeper Pam Poteet sensed right away that Dixon was trouble.
It's the way he acted. He was weird. I mean, he stood by the beds, in between the beds, by the luggage. He wouldn't ever sit down, didn't want you to make the beds, you know, stuff like that. It's like he was on guard, you know, his luggage. He just was, you know, ready, watching you.
When Dixon's story aired, Pam recognized him instantly. Her tip led the FBI straight to his doorstep.
We knew he was armed and dangerous, and he had vowed not to be taken alive. With that information, obviously you want to approach the subject with extreme caution, but once we got him subdued, he was very cooperative. All he said is, you got me good. Basically that the way that you guys arrested me was the way you needed to arrest me, and it was a lot better that way than, quote, to throw bullets at each other.
After his arrest, Thomas David Dixon pled guilty to 7 armed robberies in 4 states. He was sentenced to 28 years and is serving his time in a federal prison. Dixon will remain behind bars until at least the year 2020. A pickup truck makes a late afternoon stop at an auto repair shop. It seems normal enough, but there was nothing normal about it. Inside the truck were 2 undercover DEA agents. They were posing as drug buyers and carrying $160,000 in cash. One of the agents was Richard Foss. After 8 years on the street, he had just been promoted to a desk job. This was his last undercover assignment.
I think Richard was in a position where he was ready to advance his career. This is really a positive stepping stone in an agent's career.
The previous day, Foss had set up a deal with this man, Augustine Vasquez Mendoza, known to the agents as Fernando. Mendoza's product, 22 pounds of speed. 6:25 p.m. Leaving Pelinero in the truck, Foss enters the garage. The man in the dark blue shirt is a confidential police informant. The other man is Juan Vasquez Rubio, Fernando's half-brother. Fernando himself is not present. In the back of the garage, 2 more men wait. On the left, a second police informant. On the right, a man named Rafael Rubio Mendez, another Fernando associate. Juan Vasquez Rubio demands to see the cash.
Let me see. He looked into the duffel bag and didn't touch it or anything, but apparently he was satisfied that there was, in fact, $160,000 there.
Yeah, we got a deal.
6:30 p.m. Rubio makes a call, apparently to confirm that the buy is good.
Enrique, ya llegaron.
6:32 p.m. Outside, Pelinero alerts his backup units. The deal is going down. 6:35. The operation goes completely to hell. Rubio and Mendez want the drugs and the cash.
Richard told the individual that if he wanted the money, that he didn't have to do this, that he had kids, he had a family, that he was just doing this for profit, and that he didn't have to do anything wrong, that anything he wanted, he could have. One individual told the other one to handcuff Richard and the 2 informants. I believe that Richard saw death staring him in the face, and he reacted.
Mendez has been shot once. He goes in one direction, Rubio in the other.
It's going to hell. It's a rip-off. It's a rip-off. I'm going in.
It was very chaotic at that point. But when I saw the vehicle leaving, I tried to ram it, and I missed it. I was on the radio all this time, and I just put out a message that that vehicle needs to be stopped.
Been hit. Boss been hit. Where is he? He's in there. Let's go.
With backup units in pursuit of the suspects, Pelinero rushes inside. Richard Foss has been shot 5 times at point-blank range. He will be dead within an hour.
Paramedics, right now.
6:41 p.m. Drug enforcement agents are in a high-speed pursuit of Mendez.
When he fled in the vehicle, it was rush hour traffic. He was on both sides, weaving in and out of traffic, and he was making every attempt possible to avoid being captured.
6:45 p.m. Agents take down Rubio in a nearby alley. 6:52 p.m. 3 miles away, Mendez is cornered. By 7:15, it was all over. Rafael Mendez and Juan Vasquez Rubio would each be charged with first-degree murder. They were both convicted and sentenced to life. But drug boss Augustin Vasquez Mendoza was in the wind. He was also charged with first-degree murder. Authorities had no doubt that he was the man behind the ripoff.
Robbery was their motive from the very onset. I don't think that there was ever any intent to do a dope deal with us. I believe that Richard realized that he had to do something to protect not only his life, but the life of other people as well.
Richard Foss died a hero's death at the age of 37. He was honored with the DEA's Award of Valor. He left behind a wife and 4 children.
Richard will always be in my heart. Nothing can ever take those memories and him away from me. But our main intention now is to seek this fugitive that's out there.
Update. Augustin Vasquez Mendoza is no longer out there. He was captured in Mexico and after 5 years of negotiations, extradited to the U.S. Mendoza was convicted of first-degree murder in the death of Richard Foss. He was sentenced to 70 years in prison. Coming up, a lawman, a president, and a psychic in a Wild West ghost story. The best ghost stories are usually the ones where fact and fantasy converge. What you are about to see has it all. A legendary lawman, a future president, an English psychic, and the town that put the Wild West. In the 1870s, South Dakota's mining towns were flush with outlaws, gamblers, and swindlers, all looking to make a quick buck. The most infamous destination was Deadwood. This was the place where Wild Bill Hickok was shot in the back and Calamity Jane peddled flesh in the local cat house.
It was a wild and woolly town. The miners just absolutely were raising hell in this town. Most towns are 95% solid citizens and 5% characters. In Deadwood, the reverse is true.
But the good times didn't last. They never do. During the 1870s, a stranger rode into town. His name was Seth Bullock, and he was Deadwood's first sheriff.
From what I have read, he didn't have to use a gun, actually. The story is that one look from his very penetrating gaze was enough to quell most lawbreakers.
All right, boys, what's going on?
Sheriff Bullock took his cleanup campaign all over the territory. One afternoon, he came across 3 characters who had the look of cattle thieves.
What the hell's going on here? What are you boys doing in these parts?
We're looking for a horse thief.
What's your name? My name's Theodore Roosevelt, and I'm the Deputy Sheriff of Billings County.
It was a rocky start to an enduring friendship. When Theodore Roosevelt formed the Rough Riders, Seth joined up. When Roosevelt was sworn in as president, Seth was an honored guest. After Roosevelt's death, Seth arranged to have this memorial, called the Friendship Tower, erected just outside Deadwood. 9 months later, Seth himself passed away, and he was buried at a gravesite overlooking the monument. In recent years, Deadwood has boomed again, thanks to legalized gambling. The Bullock Hotel, founded by Seth in 1895, has been renovated and restored and looks almost the same. Maybe that's why his ghost likes to hang out in the hallways.
At this point, over 30 employees and a handful of hotel guests have had experiences here, to the point where it's commonplace, to the point where we laugh about it and just take a lot of fun in the fact that we feel that we're not alone here.
Norm Stevens is a slot machine supervisor at the hotel. He was working in the basement one morning when the mysterious shadow of a man fell across the wall. When Norm turned, the shadow vanished. Operations manager Joey George walked by the bar after closing time. He was certain that all of the stools were lined up in a row. Joey stepped into the office and then heard unusual noises behind him. He returned to the bar. Every one of the stools had been moved. Strange, yes. Unnerving, a little. But mere child's play compared to this.
We had a young employee who was, I think, about 18 at the time, and he was working in the back, which is the restaurant now. And he came flying out of the back room, and he was just ghost white, and said that he saw a figure in Western attire with jeans tucked into the boots. And he was very, very much afraid, and he would never go back into the kitchen by himself after that, and thereafter quit.
Folks in Deadwood never doubted it was the ghost of Seth Bullock. Still, it's good to have confirmation, even if the source raises a few eyebrows. 5,000 miles away, a self-proclaimed psychic says that he was receiving odd messages from beyond the grave. By pure coincidence, the psychic's name was Sandy Bullock.
Occasionally, various people pop through, and the name Seth Bullock, I thought perhaps it was an ancestor that was coming through to say hello or something like that, and I rather dismissed it.
But the spirit of Seth Bullock did not go away. Sandy's encounters were so convincing that he felt compelled to write an open letter to the proprietors of the Bullock Hotel.
I thought if I write to someone in this place called Deadwood, they would just think I'm a nutty old Englishman and forget it, you know, throw it away.
Sandy's letter arrived while the hotel was undergoing extensive renovations.
All information at the time as I read it, I thought to myself, well, he found a book someplace on Deadwood, read it, and wrote to me. But at the very bottom of the letter, it mentioned that Seth says he can't haunt the hotel right now because of all the banging that's going on. And I thought to myself, what's driving me crazy too, so. But he also said that he'll be back and you'll know it's old Seth, quote unquote. And that is when, again, the hair stood up on the back of my neck, because that was my aunt's pet name for Seth. Anytime something strange would happen, Jerry would say, old Seth is up to his tricks again.
Local journalist Rena Webb was intrigued. She wrote back to Sandy Bullock.
In this letter, I said to him, I would like to pose to you a test question. Who was the well-known person who was a close friend of Seth Bullock's? And how is Bullock's grave positioned in relation to that friendship? When I got his letter in response to my test question, he said, tall trees block the view from his old bones, but Teddy and he still meet in the afterlife. And I said, whoa. And I still get goose pimples when I think about that.
Marina believes the message referred to this stand of pine trees. They now obstruct the view of Theodore Roosevelt's monument from Seth Bullock's gravesite.
Now, very few people in Deadwood know the story about Friendship Tower and the friendship between Seth Bullock and Teddy Roosevelt. The positioning of the grave to be able to see, at that time, Friendship Tower across the gulch. There was no way Sandy Bullock, sitting in Dorset, England, could have researched this. I mean, it's just not possible. There's just too much evidence of Seth's presence in this town, and particularly at the Bullock Hotel, to discount it. All I know is the evidence seems to point very strongly in the direction of Sheriff Seth Bullock still being on the job in Deadwood, South Dakota today.
Next, the strange case of people who suddenly catch on fire, and nothing is left but ashes. For Kay and Mike Fletcher, it was a morning they'll never forget.
Mike?
Out of nowhere, a cloud of smoke suddenly erupted from Kay's body.
My sweater!
Take it off!
So take a look at my back, because I'm thinking, do I have blisters or what? And he says, no, it's just red. We really were frantically looking through the clothing, you know, like arm and back, and just looking it over very carefully. And we found absolutely no discoloration. We found no sight of any kind of fire damage.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually coming off of her skin, but there was no flame. The smoke was so thick that we did have to turn on the fan and open the window just to get the smoke out of there. Now, earlier in my life, I had worked at a crematorium, and the smell was that of burnt flesh.
For the Fletchers, the entire episode was hard to comprehend. Had Kay survived the bizarre phenomenon known as spontaneous human combustion? And if so, she was one of the lucky ones. Most cases end in death. Mainstream science says it could never happen. A person cannot just burst into flames without warning or cause. But mainstream science has been wrong before. Kendall Mott hadn't heard from his father, George, all day. George, a retired fireman, had serious lung problems. He needed an air pump and face mask just to help him breathe. Even before he went inside, Kendall knew something was wrong.
The windows were all brown. The door handle was warm when I grabbed it. It was real dark inside the house, and it smelled like it had been burnt.
Dad?
Kendall couldn't believe what he was seeing. All that was left of his father was a scattering of ashes, a few splinters of bone, and a fragment of skull.
It's scary to find somebody like that, to walk in and find somebody that you love, you know, all burnt like that, with no explanation as to why or what happened.
There's incredible localized damage done to the body. George Mott was incinerated to an extent that we have been told by forensic experts could only be replicated inside a crematorium operating at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit or more for 12 long hours.
It had all the earmarks of a spontaneous combustion case. The TV had melted, but much of the bedding was undamaged. Nearby, a box of wooden matches was still intact, and air was still pumping through George's face mask. It shouldn't surprise anyone to hear that skeptics say there's a rational explanation.
Now, do I know exactly what happened? I don't, but let me reconstruct a little bit. We're told that Mr. Mott was a former drinker and a former smoker, but that he had reformed. He was depressed. Just suppose that he said, "What the heck, I think I'll have a cigarette." This would explain him taking off the oxygen mask while the unit would still be left running, and it would explain why the matches were there. Now, if that's the case, then this is just another case of smoking in bed, and is not mysterious, and is a rather mundane case.
But even a confirmed skeptic would not use the word mundane to describe the next case. A gas company meter man named Don Gosnell made an unpleasant discovery at the home of Irving Bentley, a 92-year-old retired physician. As usual, Gosnell let himself into the basement.
When I got to the bottom of the steps, there was a pile of ashes on the floor. And there was an odor, something I'd never encountered before. It was kind of a sickening, sweet odor. And then I looked up, and here there was a hole burnt through the floor right above me. And I stood there and I looked at that hole, and there was little red embers all around the hole yet.
Gosnell rushed upstairs. Nothing could have prepared him for the gruesome scene in the bathroom.
All there was part of one leg, and was so discolored, I couldn't tell it was a human being or a mannequin until I got right down close and looked at it. And when I got the picture, I left right then.
What is so amazing and so profoundly perplexing to mainstream science about the scene that Dr. Bentley left behind is the incredibly intense fire that consumed his body quite literally to powder, leaving behind only his head, a knee bone, and a lower left leg as mute testimony that this had once been a human being. The rest of his body was ash in the basement below. We believe that Dr. Bentley answered a call of nature, or standing in front of the toilet, suddenly, spontaneously, he became a human fireball. The nature of the fire, and we kind of use fire in quotes here, failed to produce enough thermal energy to melt the aluminum walker, failed to produce enough heat to blister paint on the bathtub inches away, and yet was quite capable of directing its energy downward through the oak beams, through the flooring, and into the subfloor beneath, into the basement.
The case of someone like Dr. Bentley is very understandable in the sense of him being infirm. He had a history of setting his clothes on fire from his pipe. His clothing was pockmarked with burns from his pipe. In many of the cases, the person's own body fat can contribute to the fire. If we imagine Dr. Bentley with his body on fire, falls to the floor, there is linoleum on that floor, and linoleum, once it catches fire, is a very powerful flammable material. The flooring burned, the subflooring burned, and beams, there's beams underneath. There's a tremendous amount of wood underneath his body to act as a funeral pyre. Mysterious? Not really, not scientifically mysterious. Unusual, yes.
The debunkers of spontaneous human combustion could conduct a very simple experiment. Take a cadaver, put it on a tar-based linoleum flooring, put an aluminum walker over top of it, and drop a cigarette on it. If it burns to powder, we're going to be real impressed, and that person deserves a Nobel Prize in physics. But I'll wager money that experiment's going to fail.
Larry Arnold theorizes spontaneous human combustion may be an explosive aberration of the electrical current flows naturally present in the body.
We have the potential of hundreds of thousands of volts of electricity coursing through the body instantaneously. If the amperage is sufficiently high, then the body would literally become its own electrocution mechanism. It would fry itself out from the inside electrically.
This is crack pottery of a very high order. There is not a single reasonable theory for spontaneous human combustion. There is no convincing scientific evidence of it, and so the mystery mongers ought to shut up and get a life.
Is spontaneous human combustion real, or can every case be explained away? The jury is still out, unless, of course, it happens to you. Next, he was young, successful, and he had no reason to kill himself, and his father was determined to prove it. It's the kind of situation every parent dreads. Larry and Lois Williams hadn't heard from their son, Danny, in nearly 2 days.
If he doesn't answer the door, I'm gonna go inside. Danny, this is your dad.
I kept calling Danny's name, saying, Danny, this is your dad, this is me coming in. He did have a gun in the house for protection, and I didn't want to be in a situation where he was asleep and shot his own dad.
That would not be a concern. Danny was already dead.
He was sitting on the couch in an upright position with a bullet in his head and a gun in his lap. So the comment that I made as I went through the door, oh, Dan, don't let this be what it looks like.
23-year-old Danny Williams was Larry and Lois's youngest son. He managed distribution for the family's multi-million-dollar apparel manufacturing company. Larry Williams called the Galesburg police.
Well, it's a 9mm semi-automatic pistol.
The position of the body, the type of wound, the absence of any specific evidence of foul play indicated to us that the gunshot wound could have been self-inflicted and caused us to classify the case as a suicide.
Larry Williams hired private detective Mike Turnquist to investigate. Soon, he had something to report. The police said Danny died very early Saturday morning, but a neighbor told Turnquist that she had seen Danny alive 8 hours after the time of death.
I shouldn't admit it, but I watch everybody's business. It was Saturday morning that I saw Danny get in the car with this woman. So naturally, being nosy as I am, I looked her over real good. She had dark hair. She would have been between 25 and 30.
The police dismissed the account, saying Mrs. Sayers had her days mixed up. It was already established that Danny had been picked up by his mother on Friday, the day before he died.
No, it was not Friday, it was Saturday. And the lady in the blue car was too young to have been his mother.
Other witnesses noticed activity at Danny's house on Sunday, a full 24 hours after he died. At least one person described seeing a young man with curly brown hair, approximately 5 feet 4 inches tall.
The eyewitness testimony can easily be mistaken. It's as simple as that. They may have seen some activity there, but it's a distinct possibility that the days may have been confused as to when they were seeing that movement.
Danny's father claims that some of the physical evidence turned up by police argued against suicide. The bullet that supposedly killed Danny exited through his head and lodged in the wall. When the police removed the bullet, there was only one small spot, which appeared to be blood, on the paneling.
With the head being that close to the wall, you most certainly would expect to find large or massive amounts of blood splatter, either at or near the back of the couch and most certainly on the back wall.
By now, Larry Williams was convinced Danny had been murdered. He brought in an independent forensic scientist, Mark Bosey.
I had this feeling that I was going to go out, see the house, see a typical messy scene, and tell Larry that I think your son committed suicide. When we get to the house and there's a lack of evidence to support the suicide. Oh, hey Larry, you better take a look at this.
Bosey used a luminescent scanner to look for blood evidence invisible to the naked eye. He found significant samples in several places, even on the television set.
Take a look at that splatter pattern all over the TV set. If Danny just shot himself sitting there, you definitely would not have a pattern at all behind the TV set. And there's nothing to indicate Danny got up after shooting himself and walked around. So someone else obviously dropped the blood droplets everywhere else that we found. I'm gonna have to take a swabbing of that, bring it back to the lab, get it typed.
Blood analysis later revealed the presence of 2 different blood types in the house. Danny's blood was type B. Mark Bosey found type B and type O in the den where Danny's body was. Bosey also found type O in the bathroom and inside the pocket of Danny's jeans.
It is not possible that all the blood in the room came from Danny. It's an impossibility. This evidence suggests to me that 2 people in the room were bleeding. 2 separate individuals.
The official police position is that the alleged type O blood samples were compromised by the crime scene cleanup crew. Samples of the blood were submitted to the Illinois State Crime Lab for testing. The official conclusion, the samples could not be definitively typed.
I could guarantee you'd send that same evidence to 5 different independent laboratories that have no idea what this case is about, that have no idea that this was a murder or a suicide or anything, and they will come back with type B blood and type O blood.
The independent lab feels very confident in their results. They have provided those results to Mr. Williams, and that's contributed to his concerns about the finding of suicide. We feel just as strongly about the results of the Illinois State Crime Lab, that there was no evidence of a type O blood in that home.
Mark Bose's investigation appeared to turn up one new piece of evidence that undercut the police theory and supported his theory that the blood of two different people was in Danny's house.
It's the same type that Danny's gun would use.
Mark was processing the room. He opened the couch up and a shell casing fell out. Later tests showed that this shell did come from Danny's gun. It had been recently fired. So there were two shells found on the couch that came from Danny's gun.
From the scene photos I saw, Danny's gun was laying on his lap, his hand was laying on top of the gun, just as if he shot and then set it back down. It's a little inconsistent with a suicide. Okay, Larry.
Next, Bose tried to match the bullet path to Danny's position on the couch.
Okay, how am I doing?
Yeah, the line's right.
All right, and it's through my head, and it can be squeezed off.
But you would fall over on the floor. I would fall over on the floor. The body would have gone forward. The body would have moved back into the position it was in. The gun probably would not have been in his lap. It probably would be on the floor at a coffee table.
Mark Bose now believes that Danny was probably not shot in his house. Here's how it might have happened. There was a fight somewhere else that left Danny and another person bleeding. That person took Danny's keys out of his pocket, leaving behind a trace of type O blood. Finally, the crime scene was arranged to make Danny's death look like suicide.
We can advance theories all day long. Everyone can. But the factual data that we've gathered, we feel comfortable with.
Danny, this is your dad.
The investigators, crime labs and what have you that I've had working on this from the beginning, as soon as they went into the house, saw evidence that was in there then and still there now, were convinced that I was that it was cold-blooded murder.
Was Danny Williams murdered or did he kill himself? The official coroner's report lists Danny's cause of death as uncertain. If you have any information about the death of Danny Williams, please log on to unsolved.com.